Hi folks, I'm Rich Bills and I'd like to take you on an adventure. Hi folks, and welcome to part 3 of my devlog about building a first-person immersive sim in Godot 4. Don't freak out about this week's title, I'm fine. It's the player that's bleeding. This week I've been spending most of my time thinking about and implementing some more core systems. In this episode I'll be going over a bunch of them and how they interact with one another. So let's not waste any more time and head straight aboard the Peregrine for a look. First up, footsteps. Terrain now has an optional set of sound effects that can be played whenever something stands on it via a footstep component. The speed of it is tied directly to the entity's movement speed. I'm using a placeholder for sounds for now, and I'm still trying to fine tune it a little bit, but you get the idea. Different surfaces can have different sound effects too. This metal walkway, for instance. It's a little thing, but it really helps ground the player in the space. No pun intended. One key system I've implemented is stats. The player, for example, has health, stamina and hunger stats for now. They will have many more. This is just for illustration purposes. Other examples of stats are things like weight and price and construction time. Some stats, such as health, have a maximum, and some like weight are fixed. Obviously, not all these stats are relevant to every entity in the game. I can't put a price on my player, for example. So I have a stats component that manages which stats an entity has. So if, say, a box needs to know how strong the player is before he picks it up, it can query the player's stats component for his stat strength. If an entity doesn't have the requested stat, the component just returns null. The stats panel bottom left is wired up to and listens to any change signals in those stats, so automatically updates in real time. You can see that the stamina is updating as I'm burning through it as I'm running, and then when I stop it returns back. Oh, my hunger's going down as well because I haven't eaten in a while. So now we have stats, let's talk about effects. An effect is something that can be applied to an entity that alters its stats in some way. As you can see, the player is currently suffering from minor bleeding and radiation sickness. The bleeding is slowly reducing the player's health, and the radiation is stopping the player from recovering stamina when they exert themselves. The player can have many effects. In fact, there's a stamina regen effect permanently attached to the player. They also have a permanent hunger effect that saps their hunger stat over time. Not worked out how I want hunger to work yet though. Possibly like Valheim in that starving won't kill you, but will decrease your maximum health and stamina. Each effect has a list of symptoms which can be either good or bad. Behind the scenes, they increase or decrease a stat. So one of the symptoms for bleeding, for example, is that health is reduced. One of the symptoms for radiation sickness is that stamina regen is reduced. Likewise, the symptom for getting healed by a health pack is that health increases. Each effect can also have a severity and a base duration. The higher the severity, the longer the effects last and the symptoms become more acute. Next up will be cures, for example. Dragging a bandage to a bleeding effect will reduce the bleeding effect's severity based on the quality of the bandage, and may completely remove it, for example. Effects are turning out to be a robust method of handling a lot of immersive sim elements. Take hiding, for example. The player will have a visibility stat, ironically hidden to them, and standing in shadows will reduce that. As you can see, I have doors now. Each can be configured to have a different mesh, theme, animation, speed and sound effect. They can also have optional locks, built into the door themselves or operated remotely. Here the blue door is locked with a blue key card, which I don't have, so I can't interact with it. The red door is locked with a red key card. Oops, there we go. Which I do have. So I can interact with it. The only interaction available to me is unlocking it at the moment because I can't open it because it's locked. So I'll unlock it with my security key and now I can open it. Locking an open door automatically closes it. I'm debating whether or not to only allow locks to be unlocked if you're holding the key in your hand. I suspect that might get a bit tedious after a while, so for now I'm just checking the player has the key in their inventory. And speaking of inventories and keycards, that brings us on to items. An item in this game is anything that can be collected into an inventory, which is just a list of items and their quantities arranged into stacks. Items are still entities. In fact, an item is just an entity with an item component, which tells other entities that it's an item. Each item in the game has an item data resource that stores the item's name and description, icon, its mesh and theme. Each item also gets its own stack of relevant stats, just like the player, but they have things like price and weight, along with a recipe needed to show how to make them. Behind the scenes, a recipe is just another inventory, a list of items and quantities. And because an item is an entity, we can add components to them and give them extra functionality. Once an item is picked up, it goes into your inventory. Inventory systems have always been a bit of an Achilles heel for me, so I spent some time thinking about what I want for my perfect inventory and the simplest way to implement it. I've never liked the idea of limited stack sizes. In my game, the amount of something you can carry is governed by your strength and the bulk of the item, not by some arbitrary number the dev came up with. You can exchange items with other inventories using drag and drop. It's still a little visually buggy, but it works. For some reason the drag icons goes behind some panels even though they're still on the same level. Anyway, I'll fix that. I'll add some shortcuts too to add and remove all items and that kind of thing in split stacks. As I mentioned earlier, you'll also be able to drag things like bandages to your status effects to heal and cure them. Items also have an equip location, so helmets can only go on heads, for example. And one last item to wrap up, a little pop-up debug window. I'm not debugging anything at the moment, so it's just showing the current FPS. There's still a lot of work to do around items and inventories, but there's enough now to play a game and build some puzzles, I think. So that wraps it up for this week. I'm always happy to go into this stuff in any more detail if anybody needs, but there's no point me waffling on about it if you've heard it all before. No idea what I'll get done for next week, possibly some crafting, but I do hope to see you then. Many thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to keep in the loop. You can always catch me on Blue Sky too. I'm putting regular updates on there now. See you later, folks.